If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for another live stream episode of the show. Really appreciate you listening. After having a rough day, there's nothing like being able to head home and do whatever you need to do, grab something to eat, maybe something to drink, and maybe watch a little TV on top of that. But then after that, to be able to head to bed. There's just something about heading into your bedroom and turning in for the night that all of us, we really take it for granted. Well, just imagine for a second that of all the places to have a Dogman encounter, you wind up having an encounter with one in your own bedroom. Now, there are a lot of places that are bad places to have a Dogman encounter, but in my opinion, I really can't think of a place that's worse than your own bedroom to have one. Well, tonight's guest, unfortunately, had her encounter in her own bedroom. She seems to be handling it really well, surprisingly well, which definitely beats the alternative. I'm so glad that it hasn't traumatized her as much as I thought it would have. Well, without me getting any deeper into it, let's just bring her in here now. Amy, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, how you doing?
Well, I'm doing all right. More importantly, how about yourself?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time. Amy, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Okay. Just as far as like background where I come from or
Yeah, anything you want to tell us about yourself, that'd be fine.
okay. Well, I've lived in Texas my entire life and I'll say that as far as like my family history and growing up, my dad, he always had a lot of ghost type stories. A lot of my family, they lived in the Huntsville area, which if you're familiar with Texas, not sure if you are, but that's kind of like considered the country, kind of, the sticks out in the middle of nowhere. So of course I feel like people are more prone to seeing things in those types of atmospheres. And like with many of your stories I've heard, most people are seeing the Dogman late at night in the woods, these types of scenarios. But my dad, he used to see in Huntsville something called a jack-o'-lantern. So it's kind of like a floating fireball. So he used to tell me stories like this. But as far as my own stories, as a kid, I grew up having lots of sleep paralysis. And a lot of times with the sleep paralysis, I would feel a sense of like getting dragged around my room. It was a very odd feeling. It was like an out of body experience, but I don't think I really knew what it was at that time. But it just felt like I was just being dragged all around my room, and I never actually saw anything as a kid. But as a kid, I was terrified, like of this happening, and it was something that I didn't really know much about. And I think most kids, you don't, and you don't really talk to people about it. I think maybe I talked to my dad about it, but it wasn't something I would really bring up a lot in conversation. It wasn't until I got maybe into my teenage years that I started realizing, like I heard what it was called. It was called sleep paralysis. And do you have any questions so far?
Well, it's not really a question, just a request. There's surprisingly a lot of people who still don't understand what sleep paralysis is all about. For those listeners, can you give them some information on that?
Yeah. I feel like everyone's probably had it at least at one time in their life. It's basically where your body is asleep, but your mind is awake. So it feels like you're just kind of paralyzed, and you can't move. And you have this feeling of like you want to scream out, but you can't. And some people say like it depends on like culture, religion. Some people say it's like a demon sitting on your chest when it happens. I've heard that before. Actually, I think that's the main one I've heard. Um, and you are more susceptible to different realms when you're in that state. Um, you can, some may say you're having hallucinations. I don't think you are. I think it's you're at a higher consciousness, so you can, see and feel different realms more so than you would just in your normal natural state of being awake, if that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that
No, you
correct.
did a really good job.
Yeah.
I've actually had sleep paralysis a couple of times, 2, maybe 3 times, and yeah, I'm here to tell you it is no fun at all. What causes sleep paralysis is, as far as the clinical side of it goes,
Hmm.
your brain, when you're asleep, it basically paralyzes your body so that you don't act out your dreams and your nightmares and risk hurting yourself. Well, sometimes when you wake up and everything isn't quite in balance, you still have that paralysis going, but you're able to see what's going on in the room. And it's a really frightening experience. If you haven't experienced it, thank goodness, because yeah, it's really frightening. It really is.
Yes, it is. And especially as a child, like I said, you don't really know what it is and why it's happening. And it's hard to put it into words and explain it, I think, when you're a child. One thing this one's going to sound crazy, but I will go ahead and put this one out there. When I was a kid, I was kind of obsessed with Peter Pan, and I always wanted to fly. And there was a time when I was in my room, I was not sleeping. And this might have been actually an out of body experience that I did wide awake. I really can't tell you. And when I told my mom, she, of course, she was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, do it again." And I, jumped off my couch, but anyway, I swear I flew, like it felt like I flew outside, like in the street, and I was just flying around. Now I know kids, they have active imaginations, but I also think kids, they are more in tune with things than adults are, because they still do have that imagination, and they still do have you know they believe anything is possible, like they don't rule anything out. Anyway, I'll say that was kind of like my first, I guess, out of body, as far as me being completely aware of what it was. But like I said, when I told my mom, she was like, "Oh, you flew, huh? We'll do it again." And then she told me to jump off the couch, and I did. And of course, I didn't fly. But anyway, I'll just leave that one there, because, that has nothing to do with really the paranormal in the sense, that what we're discussing tonight. But that was something that I did experience as a kid. So like I said, I started off having a lot of just things happen as a child, and it continued on into teenage and then into an adult. And as an adult, because you asked me, initially about was I scared? I think it's because I've had things happen for so long that it's been kind of like, ugh, here we go again, another experience type thing. So I've been able to kind of maybe compartmentalize a little bit better than as for a person who has never experienced something paranormal, if that makes sense. Um, but I'll start off by telling you the experience I had back in, I want to say it was either 2009 or 2010. I was having some sleep issues at that time. I was having issues falling asleep, and I wasn't really one to take anything, but unless it was like natural. So my dad had suggested that I take valerian root. I don't know if you've heard of this. It's just a natural herb that can help with sleep. So I tried it, and he said take two, but he normally took two, and he's a 6'1" man. So, for him, that was probably nothing. But for me, I was like, okay, two, it's natural. I should be okay. Well, I wasn't okay in the sense that it didn't actually help me fall asleep. It actually had the opposite effect. And I was in a state of sleep paralysis the entire night. And I couldn't move, I couldn't talk. And at the time, I was living with a roommate. And I saw what most people have, known as, now it's becoming like a trend on TikTok. I just found that out recently, that people are actually trying to see this hatman entity, and people are taking like heavy amounts of Benadryl, like to the point where they're on the verge of death, which I think is so stupid. But they're seeing the hatman doing this. And I saw the hatman. He was in my closet, and that was more terrifying than the Dogman, like I told you prior to this interview. He was dope faceless. I couldn't see anything. He had the brim hat and a coat, and it was so weird. He came out of the closet and said to me, "Where is my hat?" And I'm just like, "Oh my god, what is happening?" Like I was sweating, like profusely sweating, because I was like, first of all thinking, well, your hat's on your head, but why is this thing talking to me? And all while that's going on, I'm literally seeing like this little demonic, um, almost look like a tiny reptilian creature just running circles in my room. Just circles, circles, circles. And then on top of that, I'm having that dragging experience that I felt when I was a kid. So I felt like I was being dragged everywhere. It was completely terrifying. Um, that happened all night, and I got no sleep. And I asked my dad, I said, the next day, I said, "What was that you gave me?" And he was like, "It's just valerian root. It's just a natural herb. Like, you buy it over the counter. It's nothing special." And I said, "Well, first of all, it didn't help me sleep. And this was my experience." And he was like, I've never heard of that before. Like, that's never happened to me. And that's when I realized, like, I'm very sensitive to medications in general. I try to stay away from them as much as possible. But after that, I was like, I'm never taking valerian root again. But then a few years after that experience, I realized this hatman phenomenon was something other people had seen before. Like, it wasn't just me. And like I told you recently, I just came across videos saying that people are trying, like, it's a trend now that people are trying to see this, whatever it is. And I think it was definitely something demonic, because, like I said, too, this little reptilian like creature was running around as well. So that was like my first experience seeing something like that. And it was pretty traumatizing. Like, after that, I was scared to go to sleep. Like, I had talk about sleep problems. That's when I was like, okay, I don't want to go to sleep. I got to stay up all night to make sure this doesn't happen again. But technically, that's what I did anyway, because, like I said, I never actually ended up going to sleep that night because I was just in that state of paralysis and super terrified. So, um, any questions about that?
Not yet. Please continue.
Okay. So now going into 2024, I was taking, and let everyone know too. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God, and I've heard that when you do yoga, you can open certain doors in the spiritual realm, which I had been doing yoga, but not for that reason. I just did it because I wanted to get good stretches. Like, I have a lot of muscle aches sometimes for my job, and I would take hot yoga, and that seemed to help with my muscle tension and everything. But after doing yoga, because like the sleep paralysis had kind of dissipated for a while, but when I started doing yoga, I noticed I was going into it again more. And one night I was sleeping and I went into sleep paralysis. And at this point in my life, I am so accustomed to it. I'm able to get myself out of it really easily. So I can just kind of acknowledge I'm in it, kind of wiggle my toes, and all of a sudden I can get myself out of it. It's not a big deal. But this time I decided, you know what? I'm not going to try to get myself out of it. I'm just going to relax, like really relax into it and just go with the flow. So that's what I did. I relaxed into the paralysis. And the next thing I know, I feel like one foot is being picked up. Then I felt like my other foot was being picked up. Then I felt like it was one and one. So one foot, one arm, one arm. And all of a sudden, I just came right out of my body. And I floated all the way up to my ceiling. And once I realized what was happening, which is it was astral projection. And for people who don't know what that is, it's basically an out of body experience. People who are in the occult, they practice this. Now, granted, this was not something I was trying to do. It just happened. So, but it is an occult practice. And after this experience happened, I realized I do not want this to happen again, even if it's unintentional. So I, pray before I go to sleep every night. God protect me while I'm sleeping. Don't let anything infiltrate my dreams or try to, I guess, don't allow me to have these types of experiences if it's not for sure from you. But I know this was not from God, because once I floated up to the ceiling, I looked down and I saw my husband, and I started calling his name. And of course, he didn't hear me because I'm on a different, I'm on the astral plane. So he's not going to be able to hear me. But as soon as I said his name, boom, I went back down into my body. And when I went back down into my body, I looked over to the corner of our room and I saw the Dogman. And he was just staring right at me, didn't say anything. He had, the one thing I noticed right off the bat was the glowing eyes. They were like a orangey red glow. And I would say, as far as the height, pretty tall. I couldn't make out I can't say exactly. I wouldn't say it was like 8 feet, or I wouldn't say 7 feet tall. I want to say my ceilings are probably 8 foot tall ceilings. So he wasn't that tall, but he was at least maybe 6'5", if I had to take a guess. Once again, I'm in this state of like really relaxed, first of all. So I'm like, when I'm looking at him, I'm just kind of like staring and trying to register what exactly I'm seeing at that moment in time. It's like you just had this crazy experience where you float out of your body, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're back in your body, and you look over and you're like, what is this creature in my room? You know? Um, and like I told you before, because you were like, I mean, that had to be terrifying for you. Um, I, for some reason, it was not terrifying like it was when I saw the Hatman. Mainly because I think he didn't try to say anything. He was just staring at me. And then I was in a very relaxed state. So I think that might have had something to do with it as well. But like I told you, I rebuked it in the name of Jesus, and then boom, it was gone. So I definitely think it was demonic, whatever I saw. So
Wow,
yeah.
that's horrible. It really is.
Yeah, I mean it was an experience, but listening to the other people's experiences, I can't say mine was very different. I just wasn't as scared as some of the other people were, but I I don't know. I can't explain to you other than how I'm explaining it, like why. I guess it's because I've had so many like weird experiences with the sleep paralysis and everything that it's kind of just gotten to a point where I'm immune to it in a sense.
Well, like I told you before, thank goodness it didn't traumatize you that much. That
Right.
definitely beats the alternative. It really does. I'm
Right.
wondering though, do you think all the paranormal experiences you've had over the years, including that out of body experience, might be due to something that you've done in the past, or do you think they just happened due to some other reason?
Um, well, I do think that from what I've heard, sometimes these things can happen due to a family history. Um, and my dad had similar experiences, and people in our family have had similar experiences. So sometimes these things, it's like they carry on into generation after generation. And they, I don't know if these entities, they know people, certain people are more um, open, I guess, to the spiritual realm, whether it's, because I mean, there's two sides. There's the demonic side, and then there's the angelic side. And I mean, I've also seen like little orbs and stuff too, but I try not to feed into it too much because I don't want that type of stuff attached to me. Like, I don't invite it, if that's what you were asking. Like, have I ever done anything in the past to invite these types of things into my life? The answer is no. I've never played with Ouija boards. Um, I mean, I've never done drugs. So the answer to that is no.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. You
Yeah.
wouldn't believe how many Dogman eyewitnesses have played with Ouija boards. It kind of drives me crazy. If I had a nickel for every time I asked an eyewitness, okay, have you ever played with the Ouija board? And they say, no. And then about 5 seconds later, no, other than that one time in college where we played with it for just 15, 20 minutes. No, I haven't played with one.
Right.
And I'm
Well,
thinking, oh, no.
I will say this though. There was one time, because I was always taught never to do that. I spent the night at a friend's house who they did it, and I went downstairs because I was told not to partake in this type of stuff. So maybe that, but I highly doubt it because, like I said, I didn't actually do it. They were doing it. I was downstairs, they were upstairs. So I don't know. I mean, I want to say even too before that I was already having these types of experiences anyway. Um and I do think it's generational. I do think if you have a family history, it can be passed down to generations. And my family, we have Choctaw Indian blood in us, and I do think a lot of Native Americans, they can experience these types of things as well. So that could have something to do with it. Um, on my mom's side, my grandma, she was very intuitive, and sense things. So I don't know. I feel like I have it kind of going on both sides of my family.
Wow, no wonder you have all those experiences. I'm wondering though, you said something that made my ears perk up. When they were playing with that Ouija board upstairs, was that in the same house where you had all these other experiences?
No, that wasn't even my house. That was my friend's house.
Okay, I
Yeah.
missed that
So
part.
you're right. Yeah, that was at my friend's house. No, all my experiences, they've been in different places, houses, apartments, you know. So,
Wow, I'm so sorry you have to deal with all that. That's horrible. I sure hope your days of having those experiences are behind you.
well, I will say this: I haven't had a sleep paralysis, or haven't had sleep paralysis. I'm not going to say since the Dogman. I want to say maybe I've had it one other time, but I didn't see anything in that moment. Um, so actually, you know what? Nope, nope. I take that back. I take that back. I did have something happen again after that. Um, but I don't know if I'm ready to talk about that one because it's yeah.
No, not to
I think
interrupt you there, but trust your instincts. If you're not sure you want to put it out there, then please don't.
yeah, I don't think I'm ready to talk about that one just yet. But because I'm still trying to process that. But the other two, that those are the main ones. And yeah, like I said, Hatman was very traumatizing for me. Very traumatizing. Uh, I had trouble sleeping for a long time after that one.
I can understand why you would.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's horrible. No one should have to deal with anything like that
No,
at
no,
all.
no, they shouldn't. And especially like I'm 38 now, but as a young, woman, you're like, what is happening? This is insane. Like it's crazy. I feel like as as a man, and you're seeing Dogman, it's terrifying too. But or like any type of entity of that's something beyond our realm is terrifying. But like as a young woman, and you're just kind of like by yourself, like yeah, I was living with a roommate at the time, but it wasn't close enough to go say anything about it. You know what I mean? So it was kind of something I somewhat internalized. I mean, I talked to my dad about it, and he believed me, but he also was like, "Well, that's so weird that the Valerian root would do that." And I'm like, "Well, I don't know if it was necessarily the Valerian root that did it because I didn't actually go to sleep. It didn't I never felt like I got any sleep. The whole purpose was it was supposed to help me sleep, and it had the complete opposite effect, and it put me into, well, I went into sleep paralysis. So I don't know. That one is still a mystery for me till this day.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. That might
Mhm.
have had something to do with it, maybe not.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say. I'm wondering though, how sure are you, talking about the Dogman encounter, how sure are you that it wasn't just some kind of a hyper realistic night terror or a nightmare that you were having? Instead of that Dogman actually being in your room, you having an out of body, a real out of body experience and seeing it.
Um, because in a nightmare, you're it was definitely not a nightmare. I've had bad dreams or what you would call a nightmare, and I was fully asleep and I woke up startled, like, oh my God, I can't believe the dream I just had. That was so crazy. And then blah 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 blah. This was different. And I hope someone else comes on your show that maybe has had this type of experience of the astral projection, um, or even seeing Dogman as maybe a interdimensional being versus um, just a creature in the woods type situation. That way it can kind of validate what I'm saying. So, like I said, with the sleep paralysis, I was, I relaxed into it. And when I came out of my body, I was completely aware. Like it wasn't like I could see my room clearly. Like I was literally floated all the way to my ceiling, and my nose was pretty much touching my ceiling. And I was completely aware of almost hyper aware of my surroundings. And when I looked down, like I said, called my husband's name, that's when I went back into my body and I was awake. I wasn't in sleep paralysis anymore. Once I went back into my body, I was awake. And then that's when I saw the dog man. So I know it wasn't a night terror because once I was in my body, I was fully awake after that. So I don't believe it was a night terror. I think it was something that was physical at that moment. It was in my room, and the fact that went into another plane or realm, whatever you want to call it, made me susceptible to seeing into, seeing these types of things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Although I'll be the first to tell you, I really don't understand much at all about the whole paranormal side of things. So, yeah, I wouldn't be the right person to ask anything about something like that. Full disclosure. I'm so glad, like I told you before, Amy, that encounter with the dog man didn't traumatize you any more than it did. It sounds like you handled it really well. But can you think of a place that would be worse than your own bedroom to have a dog man encounter?
I mean, I guess encountering it at any time is bad. Um, yes, your own bedroom, like we discussed, that's supposed to be your safe haven. You're supposed to feel, completely safe. And yes, it's bad that it happened that way, but I didn't feel a sense of terror because I didn't feel like it was trying to necessarily hurt me. I just felt like he was scoping me out, staring at me, and it definitely seemed aware of what just happened to me, if if that makes sense. Like it was like he knew that I had that experience, and then he knew that I saw him, and it was a stare off for a few seconds, and then until I rebuked him. But I never felt like he wanted to necessarily attack me. Um, so I'm thinking that's why I wasn't super terrified from it. It was just more like he was checking me out, and that was it.
For most people, though, if they see a dogman in their bedroom, whether it tried to attack them or not, that would really knock them off their base. I'm so glad, like I said, that you've taken this in stride as well as you have. But after having that experience, did you ever feel angst when you would go to bed? Fear of maybe the idea of it coming back?
Um, I think recently I've kind of thought about it, but only because I've been watching the show and it's kind of putting into my mind, well, what if I do see it again? You know, what would happen if I saw it again? What would the circumstances be different? Would it actually approach me? Would it try? But I try not to get too caught up in that because once again, if I was able to rebuke it and it disappeared, that's how I know it was something of the demonic realm. And that keeps me mentally grounded and able to understand that this thing is scared of the name of Jesus in my experience. So if it does happen again, I know what my weapon is. I don't need a gun. I don't need to have nunchucks or, whatever. I just say Jesus and boom, it's going to go. So that's my take on it. And I know others, their experiences are different, but this was just mine. And I feel like that puts me at a mental state of ease. So,
Well, that's great. I'm so glad you knew to rebuke it. And
yeah.
I'm asked all the time, Amy, what I think these things are. I think what we might be dealing with is you've got this type of dog man, that type of dog man, and maybe this type of dog man over here. It wouldn't surprise me if some of these dog men that people encounter are just flesh and blood creatures that are out there trying to scratch out a living in the best way they know how. And then you've got another kind of dog man that is supernatural in origin, like the one you encountered there. And then maybe there's another kind of dog man that's basically born in a test tube in a government lab. If you have all three, that would definitely explain a lot of things. It really would.
Right. And I do agree with that. I think so. I think there are different types. And I think the one I encountered was more of a spiritual type. And I think the people that are experienced, the ones in the woods, they could be either a military weapon, because we know the military, well, not everybody knows, but the military are doing some dark experiments with mixing genes and, um, you know, making these chimera type creatures to use for who knows what. I mean, I think for war or whatever it is, but I think that could be because I want to say the one guy I listened to you last, he was saying that there were black trucks or black SUVs that were looking for this specific one that he encountered, and that was probably a military dogman, meaning that was their property. They were looking for it. It escaped. If it had a muzzle on it, it escaped and they were looking for it. So that's, I think, like I said, the military type of dogman. The one that could be just completely natural, um, or at least appear to be natural, that could still be an interdimensional one. Because once again, I think demons can take forms in the physical realm. And if you're not equipped with knowing about the spiritual aspect of things and you don't know how those things work, you're not going to be equipped to knowing how to fight these things off. um, it, just like when people experience the Yeti or Bigfoot, they say they'll take a shot at it and it'll disappear just like that, which tells me it's most likely an interdimensional type being that can take physical form. um, I don't think I've ever heard someone actually say they've rebuked it, um, at least as far as the stories I've heard. So I think people really need to try doing that. Um, anyone who's listening to this, and hope to God they don't have a Dogman experience, but if they do, or if it happens to happen and they've heard my story, they should try doing what I did and see if that works.
Here's a $1 million question for you. Do you think running into a supernatural dogman is better or worse than running into one that's just flesh and blood?
Better.
Why is
Better.
that?
Like I said, the weapon. The weapon is using the name Jesus, and they're going to cower to that. They're not going to be able to. I don't think they're going to want to fight you after you do that. A flesh and blood, you don't know what they're capable of. Like, that's a monster right there that could just attack you and straight kill you. Not to say the interdimensional can't, but I don't think you would be able to. Well, you could pray still, I'm sure, with the flesh and blood, but I think that would be almost no different than like a bear trying to attack you. What do you do in that situation? You can't rebuke a bear, because a bear is still gonna, if it's hungry, it's still gonna come after you. You can only pray and hope to God that it doesn't maul you to death, but I mean, that's just what I think personally. Someone else might say something different, but
Full disclosure, Amy, I had misgivings about bringing you on here to share your experience because I deal with a lot of eyewitnesses who are just hanging on by a thread. And for some of those eyewitnesses, the idea of having to worry about the possibility of them encountering a dogman in their own bedroom, that would just possibly push them over the edge. But on the other hand, I think it's a good idea to try and make this show a compendium so that people who've experienced these things, they can get the big picture and not be sheltered, I guess, if that's the best way to put it, from possibilities. Now, is it possible for a dog man to enter your bedroom if it's a supernatural entity without breaking through the wall or anything like that? Well, apparently so. And I have spoken with other eyewitnesses who have had dogmen in their homes, unfortunately. But I can understand how someone who's just hanging on by a thread after being so traumatized by their dogman encounter, this news is not going to be welcome at all. But I do think, on the other hand, the more you know, the better prepared you are for even remote possibilities like this. And to say remote, that doesn't do it any justice, because after speaking with thousands upon thousands of dogman eyewitnesses, what anyone listening that is hanging on by a thread after having a traumatic encounter needs to know is, I mean, it is really apparently once in a blue moon that anything like this happens when it comes to dogmen. So I just wanted to put that out there.
right. Yeah, I mean, I could see a person who had a really traumatizing experience hear my story and be like, "Oh, great. Now I could potentially have one that's interdimensional reappearing and disappearing in and out of my room." But, you know, once again, I'm going to bring this back to being a believer. And I think a lot of these types of creatures are mentioned in the Bible and somehow they go overlooked. Like, I don't understand how a lot of Christians, they don't get the spiritual realm, and they can't understand and they can't grasp that there's like pure evil out there, and the only way to really combat pure evil, especially on a spiritual level, is, using the word of God and letting them know who your, king is. Because, like it says, every one will end up bowing to him at the end and confess he is king. So I firmly believe that. And I think in my situation, like I said, mine's different because mine for sure was completely a spiritual experience in the sense that it was interdimensional all the way from what I saw. Because there's no way you can see something like that and then it disappear as quickly as it did and it not be an interdimensional thing.
Yeah, I think you've got it nailed down. I can't see what else it could have been when you consider how it responded to you rebuking it. Now, there have been people, I have spoken with Dogman eyewitnesses who tried to do the same thing and they got different results than what you got. Sometimes rebuking works, other times it doesn't. Maybe we are talking about times where it does work, it's a spiritual entity. And when it doesn't work, they're just flesh and blood dogmen.
Right.
And that's why it didn't work.
And
You
that's
gave the example about the bear.
right. And I believe that to be 100% true, that there are different types. And if it's flesh and blood, it's not going to work. I mean, you can pray, but as far as it just disappearing, that's not going to happen.
I try to do good by how I conduct myself on the show,
Mm-hmm.
what I put out there, and what I don't put out there. I do try really hard to do good by as many eyewitnesses as I can. Here's what you don't know. Over the years I've been doing this, that I've been airing episodes of Dogman Encounters, I've had so many messages come in from people who have been affected by listening to the show because they listened to this. Well, I didn't realize that was a possibility. I listened to that, or they listened to that. I didn't realize that was a possibility. People who live way out in the sticks that they used to love leaving their doors unlocked and their windows open at night, and some of them don't even have screens. Well, after listening to the show, they send you messages talking about how they've been changed. Their lives have been changed. They used to love sitting out on the porch at night, way out in the country, without a care in the world. But now, after the sun goes down, there's shutaways. They make sure the windows are locked, the doors are locked. Even when it's nice out, they can't sleep with the windows open. They can't do a lot of the things they used to take for granted. There was one guy even who used to listen to the show. This is more on a lighthearted side of things. He used to like hopping into a side by side and driving way down through the woods on his property to this pond. And he would sit on the edge of the pond and listen to the show. And after a while, there are a couple of episodes that I think it caused him to stop doing that even. But I try to walk that fine line of, I don't want to ruin lives here, but at the same time, I owe all of you the truth, to put the truth out there. So I don't know. Sometimes it's really hard to know for sure how much to reveal and how much not to put out there. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you, some behind the scenes info. But having said all that, let's get to the listener questions now from the live chat. The first one on deck is from Jody Phoebus. And Jody wants to know, has she ever had a near-death experience?
No, never.
I'm not sure if you knew this, Amy, or not, and I'm pretty sure that's why Jody asked that question. If you have an NDE, for some reason, that can predispose you to having encounters with both Dogman and Sasquatch. Did you know that?
Oh, no, I did not. But you know what? Actually, so I don't know if this, when I was a baby, a newborn, I was born with it's called a teratoma cyst on my right ovary. And I had to get rushed into surgery as an infant. Now, granted, I'm not going to remember, that experience, but could I potentially have had something happen at that point in time? Possibly. I know I was very sick. And it was, one of those hey, we got to get her into surgery now. But I was an infant. But other than that, no, I've never had a near-death experience. Mm-mm.
Well, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, that can be a gateway to open up doors for experiences like this. So that was a good question. I don't know for sure. Again, I don't know for sure if that's why she asked that question or not, but I've
Yeah,
got a hunch it probably is why she wanted to know that.
maybe. Yeah, I can understand that.
It's a good question, though. The next question is from Diego Fangs, and Diego wants to know what color was it?
It was a dark color. Um, because my room was dark already, I couldn't make out exactly the strands of hair on it, but I mean, it was a darker color for sure. I wouldn't say pitch black, but maybe like a dark grayish, like a charcoal type gray.
Yeah, as dark as your room sounds like it was, it'd be really hard to know for sure.
Yeah,
All you could do is
exactly.
guess.
I will say, like I said, what stuck out the most was the glowing eyes. Like, you can't get past those eyes. Like, those were, and that's why I remember I told you, I said it could have been wearing shorts, but I don't know. I don't remember for sure, but it was something that I felt like I might have saw, but couldn't make out for sure. But the eyes were just so, um, I don't know if mesmerizing was the word, but it definitely locks you in when you see those eyes. Like, those are eyes, those are something no one, it's just a different experience, to see orangey red glowing eyes. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a recurring theme to Dogman encounters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of eyewitnesses report that.
Yeah.
And Red Tip Savage just asked that question. You answered his question about the eyes glowing. So thanks for doing that. The next one on deck is from Shannon Umanazer, and she wants to know, did either of your parents practice witchcraft?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I was brought up in the church growing up. Now, if we're talking like the traditional occult type witchcraft that you hear about, no, but my dad was a manipulator, and that actually is a form of witchcraft, believe it or not. When you're trying to manipulate people's minds and their free will, that is a form of witchcraft. So that could have had something maybe to do with it. But like I said, this has been a generational type thing for my family. So maybe someone down the line that I didn't know practiced like true witchcraft. But as far as I know, no.
Yeah, that was a good question right there as well. The next question for you is from Angel Wake, and she wants to know, how big was the dog man? You said it was probably about 6.5 feet tall, but she also wants to know, did it show its fangs?
No, it did not show its fangs. Mm-mm. It
Thank
just
goodness.
it just stared. But it definitely had a muscular, lean build. Like, the upper body was that of a very lean, like, muscular man. And it was completely upright, standing completely upright. So, but yeah, no fangs.
Yeah, we'll play the glad game there and say thank goodness it didn't.
Yeah. Now, I'll tell you, if that would have happened, this might be more of a traumatizing event for me.
Yeah, well, for the aforementioned reason, thank goodness that didn't happen.
Right.
That's right. It looks like Christiane wants to know, why would the dog man be inside your home versus outdoors? Well, that's a question we're never going to know the answer to, other than these guys, they know how to push your buttons, whether you're talking about a flesh and blood one or one from the ether. They know that by appearing in your bedroom, that's going to be a lot more intimidating and frightening than if you run into it outside. So that's got to be why this happened.
Well, yeah, and once again, because I do believe this was an interdimensional situation, not a total flesh and blood, because I astral projected, that made me susceptible to seeing what I saw.
Yeah, you just might be right there.
Yeah.
What a strange night you had.
It was strange.
Yeah, I'd say it was. This next one on deck is from Spicy Housewife, and she wants to know, do you believe that you're marked physically or psychically, because of your Native American heritage?
Yes, possibly. I do think that could be potentially a thing, like I mentioned before. I think a lot of Native Americans, they are very in tune with these types of things. And once again, this has been a generational thing. I mean, people in my family have seen and had paranormal experiences. So I do believe it's generational.
You might be just right about that.
Mm-hmm.
The next one's from Diego Fangs, and Diego wants to know, were there any signs of the Dogman breaking in? If not, how do you think it got in?
No, it didn't break in. It was, once again, it just appeared. I think it was interdimensional. I don't think it was a flesh and blood thing. This was purely an interdimensional creature.
That answers that question. The next one is another good question from Angel Wake, and she wants to know, what shape of hat did your hatman wear?
It almost looked like an Indiana Jones type hat with like a brim, like a very, I wouldn't say fedora, but something similar to that, like an old school brimmed hat. I'm not sure what those, I don't know, like, other than a fedora, I really don't know different names for hats, but kind of like an Indiana Jones type hat.
So a hat with a flat brim around it.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, for some reason, whenever I've seen recreations, I think that's the type of hat they've always shown.
Right.
So I think you're right.
Yeah.
The next one is from Don Fredette, and Don wants to know, why does rebuking work? Does that mean it's part Nephilim or demon?
Yes, I believe it was a demonic entity, and that's why I think that worked for my situation. Others, once again, if it's completely flesh and blood or made in a lab by the government, that probably won't work.
Yeah, just might be right about that. Looks like Bang Bang wants to know, Vic, which dogmen are the ones that eat pets and humans? Well, any of them can do that. I mean, any of them can have deviant examples. I mean, I hammer on the fact that time after time, people get what I say about dogmen twisted. They think that I say, and I'm of the opinion that these guys are safe to be around all the time and they won't hurt you. They'll never hurt you no matter what. But I don't believe that. No, I mean, I do believe that you've got deviant examples of dogmen, deviant examples of Sasquatch. You have deviant examples of horses, pigs, goats, camels, elephants. You name the people. You name whatever you want to talk about. You're going to have deviant examples. You've also got dogmen and Sasquatch that normally wouldn't hurt a person, but due to this, due to that, whatever factor, all of a sudden when you run into them, they are going to possibly harm you or kill you. So I'll never say these guys are safe to be around. All I'm just saying is that the numbers clearly have shown me over the years, after speaking with thousands upon thousands of dogman eyewitnesses who were caught dead to rights but allowed to leave without so much as a scratch, that right there tells me that as a whole, they're not wired to take you out as soon as the opportunity presents itself. Now, you've got a lot of people who are of the mindset that, well, Vic, you haven't spoken to the people who are murdered by these things, and that's correct. But if I formed my opinion after only having spoken with 10 people who were allowed to leave after being caught dead to rights in a very compromising situation, that'd be one thing. But how about thousands upon thousands of them over the years who were caught dead nuts to rights in very compromising situations, but allowed to leave without a scratch? That right there tells me that, yes, as a whole, they are not wired to rip you apart as soon as the opportunity presents itself. I've used the example before with fire ants. You go put your hand on a fire ant mound. What do you think is going to happen? They're going to light you up because they are wired to do that. And they're going to light you up every time. Anytime you walk over to a fire ant mound and put your hand on that mound, they're going to tear you up because they are wired to do that. There's no gray area on that. If these guys were wired to rip us apart as soon as the opportunity presented itself, I would not, since 2007, when I spoke with my first Dogman eyewitness, I would not have spoken with thousands upon thousands of eyewitnesses who were caught in that type of a compromising situation but allowed to go. So that's why I have the opinion about that I do. Let's move on to the next question. This next one is from Don Fredette. Don wants to know, does the hatman leave when rebuked? Uh-oh, you're muted right now, Amy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I don't know, because at that time I believed in God, but I can't say I was really, I guess as spiritually connected as I am now. So I did not try to rebuke the hatman at that time in my life. Now, would I do it now? Yes. Do I think the hatman is a demonic entity? I do. Especially after hearing people who are literally trying to see it by taking an excessive amount of Benadryl, which sounds just so stupid to me. Like, these people are on the verge of death and then they're seeing the hatman. So that right there tells me, you want to talk about near-death experiences, that's pretty much what these people are trying to have to see this entity. So I do believe it is demonic, and I think you can rebuke it, but I did not do that when I saw him. Because I was so terrified too. I couldn't even move. I couldn't talk. I was in a complete state of being paralyzed from the paralysis.
Which is totally understandable.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
This next one is from Thomas Crowley, and Thomas wants to know, do you fear death?
No. Now, as far as the way I die, of course I don't want to die like a brutal death, because that would suck. But do I fear it? No, I don't.
Well, that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. You shouldn't.
No.
That's a good answer. The next question for you, I guess this is a question. It's a general question. I'm going to take this one. It's from Betty Beal. And Betty wants to know, when I was in my bedroom, the Dogman was tapping on my window. Why didn't he just come through my window? I know they have intelligence, but don't think they're jokers or playing around. Well, understand, Betty, that after having spoken with, I don't know how many eyewitnesses, maybe 3,000-4,000 over the years, Dogman eyewitnesses, not a mix of Sasquatch and Dogman, no, 3,000-4,000 Dogman eyewitnesses. Because of all that exposure, I've been able to notice patterns. If you have your eyes even halfway open when you speak with that many people who experience a phenomenon, how can't you notice patterns? Well, one of the patterns I've noticed pretty early on was how they'll seemingly go miles out of their way to traumatize you, to terrify you to within an inch of your life. And then once they can tell that's happened, well, mission accomplished. I got what I wanted, move on. And if you think about all these episodes of the show when eyewitnesses have come on to chronicle their encounters with dogmen, I'm sure you've noticed that. But to answer your question, the dogman, it wasn't out to try and kill you, because if it was, that's what would have happened. Like you said, it's clear you obviously know it could have come through your window, through your wall. It could have gotten into your house easily, but that's not what it was out to do. It just wanted to traumatize you the same way these guys have such a history of traumatizing so many of the eyewitnesses who come on the show and they share their encounters. Now, yeah, there have been cases where these guys have actually intentionally harmed people, but out of the 4,000 dogmen eyewitnesses I've spoken with over the years, 7, 8, maybe 9 of those people have been credible eyewitnesses who've told me about being intentionally harmed by a dogman. So does it happen? Yes, but it seems to be a very isolated incident when it actually does happen. So I hope that answers your question. And I got a message from you. That's right, Betty Beal. I got a message from you, an email where you asked the same question, but you brought up Kim from, I forgot the episode number, but Kim is the gentleman whose dog Dallas died protecting Kim from the dogman. You were asking me, well, that dogman broke into his grandfather's house, so why didn't the one that was tapping on my window break in and get me? Well, you've got to remember now, Kim had shot that dogman multiple times, and when you shoot a dogman, that opens up problems that you never opened, because you never harmed, you never hurt the dogman that was tapping on your window. So hope that answers your question. Let's move on to the next one. This one's from Glenn Kamada, and Glenn wants to know, was there any odor with the dogman in your room?
No. I did not smell any sulfur or anything like that.
Huh. Well, I don't know all that much about demonic entities and experiences with them. I don't know nearly enough to know if you can expect to smell sulfur every single time you have an experience with one or not, but apparently not if you didn't smell any.
I didn't smell sulfur with the hatman and the little, there's a name for the reptilian creature that was, I actually learned it not that long ago, but I can't recall it at the moment. But there's some type of folklore, but I do believe anytime you hear about folklore, it's just experiences people have that are actually real. And these stories are just passed down generation to generation. But I didn't smell anything at that time either. So, everyone, I think, has similar experiences, but they differ to a degree. It's like when someone sees an accident, everyone's going to tell their side of the story, and it's going to have a little bit of variation because maybe someone saw it from a different angle than the other person, but they still see the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
That does. Before I read this next question, I just wanted to let you know I've been in contact with Joe ever since she came on, and she talked about that dogman that was trying to rip its way, or apparently was trying to rip its way into the house to get her and her fiance that one night. Wound up killing the American bulldog, or I guess it was a large pit bull that was outside named King. Well, Joe wants to come back on next Tuesday night, and she is going to be back then for a special midweek show to thank all of you so much for all the help that you extended to her. And also, too, I want to bring you up to speed on her situation. There are good things about her situation and still, unfortunately, some bad things and all that I wanted to bring to your attention. So if you can check out that show on Tuesday Night Live, it's going to air 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Central. Moving on to the next question. This one is from Victoria Mendillo. And Vicky wants to know, how many times has Dogman visited you?
Just that one time.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. And I never want to see it again. I mean, it's not something that I ever want to have. The experience I had it. but I definitely am not going to be searching for this thing like some people do. Like if I'm ever out in the woods and I see something, I'm not going to chase it. I'm gonna say, "Let's go now. I don't want any part of it."
Yeah, good idea. Very good idea.
Yeah, I don't want any part of it. That's it. Just like same with this, you know, a lot of people are curious about astral projection, and people practice this, and it's a big time practice in the occult. And I know now I have the ability to do it, but it's not something I want to partake in ever again. And now, not that I did it intentionally on when I saw the Dogman, but it is something that happened to me. And maybe it was something that happened to me because God said, "Well, I'll let her have this, one time, let her see how what it's like." And then, you know, maybe he wanted to see if it was something I would pursue, which I have not since I had it. So I wouldn't suggest people partake in that type of stuff either, personally. Um, that was a one and done experience for me. So,
Yeah, thank goodness for that.
yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the astral projection side of it because, to be honest with you, it was kind of cool floating out of my body. I'll tell you, it was a neat experience. But knowing that I saw something that demonic afterwards, I was like, I don't want to partake in that and open that door. So,
It does sound like it would be a neat experience, but if you open yourself up to experiences like that, I can understand why you don't want any part in that again.
right.
That doesn't sound like my kind of fun. I've got another one for you from Red Tipped Savage, and he wants to know, were the arms and legs like human ones?
Yes, the arms were. I can't really recall the legs once again. Um, that's why I feel like I was focusing more on the upper half of the body.
And that's understandable. Most
Yeah.
people would.
Yeah.
Yeah. This next one's from Al Santoriga. Al wants to know, question, why do you believe just because it's interdimensional, it's not flesh and blood in our dimension?
Well, I it could have been flesh and blood as well. I do think demonic entities can take on many forms. So I'm not necessarily saying it wasn't at all flesh and blood, but I do believe because it disappeared so quickly when I rebuked it, it was definitely an interdimensional creature.
Yeah, that's good reasoning.
Wow.
That is. Well, it looks like we're an hour and 15 in. I'm going to ask one more question, and this one is from Bruce Olson. And Bruce wants to know, how long do you think the dogman was in your bedroom, and do you feel like he was trying to communicate with you?
I think it was about 10 seconds. It was not very long. Um, could have been, but I didn't pursue that. So I'll never know for sure if it was trying to communicate. And even if it was, let's say I could do this all over again, which I would not, but just hypothetical, I would not want to communicate with something like that.
Good idea. And for what it's worth, it does seem like if they have an interest in communication with an eyewitness, they don't have any trouble doing that. So the fact that you didn't receive any type of communication from it, that makes me think that it wasn't trying to communicate with you.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
It is.
Definitely. Well, Amy, I can't thank you enough for coming on here, but before we go, do you have any closing comments you want to put out there for us?
Yeah. So I would say, um, if you are a believer in God, Jesus, you know, first thing, always anoint your house. Um, especially if you've already had an experience like this, anoint your house from, like, I'm talking top to bottom, corner to corner. Pray over your house, and ask God to protect you at all times. I think that's number one. And I've done that multiple times, so maybe that's why also it didn't get further than it did. Um, and definitely, remember the rebuking if it's something you do see in the form that I did. I would say that's your best weapon right there. Um, and I'll just leave it at that.
Well, that all sounds like really good advice to me. I'm so glad you knew to do that. Definitely am. Well, Amy, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Like I said, if you ever need my help down the road, you know how to reach me. So please do let me know if you ever do.
All right. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks again so much for your time and have a great night.
All right. You too. Thank you.
Thanks. We'll see ya.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's another one for tonight. If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it because you need help coming to terms with it, or if you just would like to be a guest on the show and share it with the listeners, all you would need to do is to go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. If you do that, then I'll reach out to you and schedule a phone consultation and we'll take it from there. But having said that, I know that the nature of tonight's episode, it made some of you uncomfortable because it's not just a straightforward run of the mill, if there is such a thing as a run of the mill Dogman encounter, but I wanted to kind of branch out and expand the circle, if you will. So I thought it was a good idea to venture into new waters. But anyway, having said that, thanks again so much as always for listening to the show and hope you have a great night and an even better weekend. Catch you next week.